Good childhood, protected,
Right.
secure,
Right.
unthreatened. Even by the war, I only remember seeing one picture of an atrocity in all those 4 years that the war went on. Somebody left a Life magazine open, or newspaper turned so that that was visible. And my dad gave to the scrap drive. They would have scrap drives to collect metal for melting down to make, I don't know what, munitions or tanks or something. And we were encouraged to keep our lead-lined toothpaste tubes and turn those in. And my father donated a helmet from World War One, and they put it on the scrap heap in the yard of the grade school where I went. They put that helmet up on top of the scrap heap, and there were things that we couldn't get during the war. Butter, we had to have ration cards to get them. You were allowed so much gasoline and so much butter. What else was on that? Was it meat?
Gasoline, meat, sugar, butter,
Oh, sugar, yeah.
cooking oils.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just post-Depression, or
Yeah.
was it, had the
Yes.
Depression lifted somewhat before the war?
The war jobs and took us out of the Depression. It was suddenly people had work and a new focus, and so that just, the Depression died when that work needed to be done and the programs came on.
About 90% taxation.
90%
Very
taxation,
high
that's what I was
taxes.
wondering, if the
Yeah.
war machine was paid for through taxes
Oh, yeah.
at the time.
Something we haven't been doing recently.
And donations, because we would buy war bonds.
We would lend the money to the government, buy a war bond,
Hmm. And you would get your money back plus
5%
Interest.
Yeah.
um,
I don't think it was 5%.
I don't know what the percentage was. I remember we got interest. You'd buy a $25 war bond, but you only paid $18.50
Yeah,
for it or
yeah.
something. And then you
Uh-huh.
would, when you cashed it
Oh,
in,
mhm.
when it was possible, then you got the full amount. And
Yeah.
my grandmother gave me a war bond. I think it was a $25 bond.
Yeah.
So at some point I was going to get $25 after the.
The government was more responsibly run than has been with the Bush people, but there again, to go to what I said earlier, we're not asking for responsibility of the American public, individual responsibility. We have guns and butter, fight 2 wars now. Nobody's asked to sacrifice anything. You wouldn't know the war was going on.
Not even any higher taxes or anything.
No.
Just mounting debt.
That's right.
Mhm.
And the only way you know there's a war on is if you watch television. That's about the only thing they've got to talk about now. Huh.
So how did you get into the war?
Well, we were living in New Jersey, in Montclair.
Here comes a confession.
And I was going to Montclair High School, not doing very well. So my family.
Is it after
decided-
prep school?
Hmm?
Is it after going to prep school?
No, this is before going to prep school. It's public school. Montclair High School was public school. I did manage to get through junior high and into high school, which really was my last outstanding scholastic achievement, was getting out of junior high. Went to the high school, played some football there, and didn't study, and it was I ran with a rather raunchy crowd, and but we thought that we were the cat's whiskers, we were the society of Upper Montclair, etc. One of my buddies was a judge's son, and a couple of the group had big cars, their family gave. They were a spoiled bunch of brats. But we thought we were God's gift to the world. So my parents bundled me off to Hotchkiss School, which is up in Connecticut. It's a prep school, boys only at that time. It's now co-ed, but excuse me. That time it was just boys. And so I went up there and for a year and was not asked back.
I've always needed a translation of that.
Well, my father didn't need any translation. I came home and he told me that I had two choices. I could go to work or I could go into the Navy. I was 17. He would sign the papers. I had the choice. Do either one, but I wasn't going to live at home. So I chose the Navy. 1943, I was 17. And I stayed in the Navy until 1946. Didn't do much. I floated around. Glad to get out.
You were sonar.
Yeah, I was trained as an anti-submarine warfare. Served my time on destroyer escorts mainly, mostly the John Day 225 destroyer escort, and on a PC and so on. But mainly I didn't do anything. I did go over to did some convoy work and stuff in the Atlantic. Most of it was in the Pacific, starting down in New Guinea invasion, all the way through the Philippines. Finally, when we subdued the Philippines.
Halmahera?
Halmahera was halfway up. That's an island between New Guinea and Australia and the Philippines. Anyway.
But you never really had to get off the boat?
No. Well, we went. No, we didn't have to go. We got off the boat. But we didn't.
Not for combat?
No.
You never took part in any combat?
Hmm?
You never took part in any combat?
Oh yeah. Naval combat and shore support and bombardment and
So what does shore support mean?
When the troops go in, you shoot over their heads to support them.
To keep people on the island
Yeah,
shores?
yeah,
from-
to
But you
keep
never
the
went
enemy-
ashore during a battle?
No.
Never?
No. Yeah, well, it wasn't much of a battle. It was down in Borneo, at what was it? Bruni Bay. I think that was the name of it. Yeah, I went ashore there, but that was those were Australians that invaded. It wasn't an American invasion. Most of our job was convoy work, which we did for submarines and supply ships and anti-submarine warfare, sweeping mines.
You were a sonar man.
Yeah.
Were
Yeah,
you listening for
submarines.
submarines?
Yeah, I probably killed more fish than any legitimate fisherman in history by dropping depth charges on schools of fish, whales, God knows what. Greenpeace should put out a flyer on me, because you can't tell a school of fish from a submarine quite often,
Or a whale?
or a whale. And so if there was any question, you'd throw the depth charges over the side, which caused great consternation by the number of fish that were blown up too. But after the war,
Wait, before you get to after the war, there was some point at which you were on in the Philippines or someplace, and the man and woman came down the
Oh, that
trail.
was
I mean,
that was
you
in
got onto land.
Oh yeah, oh sure, that was in New Guinea, at Hollandia. We went ashore and we were going up a trail, and we knew, or we thought that the trail might be mined, so we stayed off on the edge. And down the trail came a caravan of a woman walking in front of the line, and behind her, riding a horse, with all the worldly goods, came the man. Normally, it was the other way around. The man rode the donkey or the horse, and the woman walked behind. But the fact that it might be mined, she walked ahead, and which I thought was a great system. And I remember we were standing on the beach, and this guy came, the native came down, and he had a gun and a shirt, and that's all he had on. No pants, no underwear, nothing. Rather incongruous looking, but that was New Guinea. Anyway.
Friend or foe?
No friend, he was a native. Nobody liked the Japanese. And, I don't know of any native population who liked the Japanese. Mainly because the Japanese were not very kind to the natives. But after the war, I got a discharge in New York. Came home. Decided to go to college.
Wasn't there some episode on the boat when you were like making announcements over the PA?
Oh yeah, that was during an engagement when we were being attacked. That was in Lady Gulf. We were being attacked, and kamikaze planes were coming in, and we were firing at them, and they were crashing and so on. And I was control talker up on the flying bridge, so I could see everything that was going on, and I had controls, communication controls throughout the ship. So they had people wearing earphones, various places on the ship, getting orders and so on. But you know, we were firing, and all these people were closed up. So down in the engine room, and the damage control group, everybody was shut in. They couldn't tell what the hell was happening. So I'd do the football broadcast about
Play-by-play?
here they come now, and there goes one there, and overhead, et cetera, et cetera. And they were very grateful for it, except that the officers chastised me for it. They said that wasn't my job. My job was to pass information, combat information, not do a color broadcast. So, but that was, that was. I was never really scared during the war. It just never occurred to me that I could be hurt or killed or whatever. I think that was the attitude that a lot of us had. Infantry, I think, was different. I'm be the last guy to say that our war was really a tough war. If you were in the infantry, yeah, it was. Or the Marines or whatever. They had a tough war. I had wanted to go into submarine service, but my mother begged me not to, so I didn't. I'm probably alive today because I didn't, because we lost a lot of submarines. But
what did she send you during the war?
Sent me anchovies. Sent me tins of anchovies, big tins of anchovy fillets. And I'd get a loaf of bread, fresh bread, and some chocolate milk. Open the tin, sit up there by sit up there by myself in the flying bridge and eat the anchovies and bread and chocolate milk. That was the greatest meal I've ever had in my life.
I remember you eating anchovies, getting tins of anchovies and eating them out of the can and just loving them when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah. Oh,
Hey, Forrest.
Hi, Forrest.
Fill up the seat.
All right.
so anyway, after the war, I wanted to go back to college, or go to college.
So how did you get your nose broken in the war?
Well,
You got your nose broken while you were in the war, right?
Yeah, a guy punched me in the nose. He jumped out of the bunk and then punched me in the nose.
That's the first time I've heard this.
Good story there, huh?
Wait a minute, wait a
A
minute.
really random event.
Well, we just got when I got into the Navy, I had to report in New York, and I was shipped up to Sansom, New York, as a thank you, as a recruit in a boot camp. You're supposed to spend 6 weeks in boot camp, which was isolated. You didn't get any leave or anything, but when you finish boot camp, you got leave to go home, and then you were assigned someplace. And I got up to the boot camp, and it was cold and miserable, midwinter in upper New York State, which is utter hell. And it was I think the first or second night we were there. We were put in the barracks. They had double bunks, all in the barracks, and our platoon, or whatever the devil they called it, was there, and we had a petty officer who was in charge of us, and so on. And I was on watch in the morning, and all night somebody had to be on watch, and you had watch from 4 to 12 and 12 to 8 and so on. I was on the midnight to 8 in the morning watch. I think that was the way it was allocated. In any event, they blew reveille at 4:30 as usual, and it was my responsibility to make sure everybody was out of their bunks, and this one guy wouldn't get out of his bunk, so I kept shaking him, and he hopped out of the bunk and punched me in the nose. Later on, this was one of these group decisions. Well, okay, why don't you two guys meet up at the gym and fight it out later on? So, okay. And I got to the gym not wanting to fight. Unfortunately, he didn't show up. So I was saved.
By forfeiture.
Ignominious. Anyway, a couple of days later, part of the training was to learn to swim, to know how to swim. You had to know how to swim before you could be let out of boot camp. So we were lined up, and they were short of swim instructors, I guess, because they asked if anybody had had lifeguard training. Well, when I was about 5, at a camp in Switzerland, McJanet's camp, this was the school, at a camp up in Lake Annecy in France, in the French Alps. And I was there, and we were taught to dive down and get tin cans, depth of 10 feet or something like that, bring them up. That was the junior lifeguard training. And of course we learned to swim on our backs in the hall, somebody had done the chin up. It was very rudimentary. So when they asked if I'd had a lifeguard training, sure. So I was made then a swimming instructor, which meant that I was excused from marching and all this stuff.
Out in the snow and the cold.
And I spent my entire boot camp in a swimming pool teaching these kids from Brooklyn not to drown. I mean, swim was very secondary, just don't drown. And I mean, we had, so I tell this, I've told this story before, but I swear, we had a 12-foot tower, and everybody was supposed to be able to put a life jacket on, climb up to the top of the tower, and jump off, holding their nose and cupping their genitals. So these kids from Brooklyn, hell, they'd never washed their face, let alone been swimming, and we put them in the pool, and they'd sink, and they'd sit on the bottom. Then we'd bring them up. Unbelievable. Anyway, this one time we had this group in, and they'd walk to the edge of the platform, and they'd freeze. And they'd slap them on the butt, and off they'd go. This guy, we slapped him on the butt, and so help me God, he went out a couple of feet, turned around, and came back in midair, and I don't know how the hell he did it, but it was, I swear to this day, he was levitating. So anyway, he grabbed hold of the stanchions and went bing, 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 down to the bottom.
Ooh.
A little
Through the rails?
Yeah, through the
Oh.
rails and everything. He learned his lesson. He didn't do that again. But anyway, I spent my time there in warmth, in whites. I ate with the ship's company. In other words, I didn't eat with everybody else. We had our separate dining room, and it was so that I was discharged from boot camp and sent out. Originally, I'd wanted to be an enlisted pilot, and I did well on my test. They gave out a general aptitude test to several of them, and evidently, miraculously, I did well. So they thought, okay, they'd make a enlisted pilot out of me. We'd be flying boats, PBYs, PBMs. I thought that was great, except I flunked my eye exam. So then they were going to make me a electronics technician. They were going to send me to Eddy School, which is in Chicago, where people who could put two wires together trained. It was technical school, electronic technical school. But someplace along the line, they had us all in and given us tests on our hearing, on our sense of pitch, whether you could tell whether a note was higher or lower or whatever, the same, whatever. And I did well on that, so they dragged me off the train. They needed sonar operators, so they dragged me off the train, headed for Chicago, and sent me down to Key West, which was another great thing because Chicago was like upper New York. It was might as well walk into a freezer. And besides which, I have absolutely no aptitude for electronics. So I got down to Key West and trained there for 5 weeks. Excuse me, graduated, was made third-class petty officer, which was equivalent to sergeant, buck sergeant in the Army. And so they decided that they'd make me a technician, a sonar technician, so I could fix sonar gear. Well, that lasted about 4 days. I finally went up to the chief who was running the school and said, "Hey, I don't understand this. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Ohms and rats and all sorts of strange things, trying to tell me that electricity going through a wire is like water going through a pipe, but not really, because you have an electron at this end going tap and the electron at the other end falling out. That doesn't make any bloody sense." and so anyway, they sent me to sea, put me on a DE, which we commissioned in Norfolk, Virginia, and from then on it was hi-ho, the life of a roving sailor. Huh. So there we go.
What did you do with the boats when you brought them back in after the war?
Well, I had to decommission one. It was a sub chaser. I picked that up in Rhode Island. Strangely enough, one of the I was the leading petty officer, non-commissioned officer on the boat. And the captain of the boat was John McCurdy, who was one of my classmates at Hotchkiss. He'd enrolled in the V7 program and gone to Yale and graduated from Yale with an ensign's commission, and it was his first time out of the box, and he came aboard and it was really a strange pair, and we took that darn PC down to Charleston, South Carolina. Neither of us knew how to navigate, so we just read the charts and watched for the buoys and markers all the way down, and took it up the Charles River and tied it up. We were supposed to take everything off the ship, catalog it, and pack it, and so on. The ship had been in operation for about 4 or 5 years, and of course, new stuff was always put aboard. And here we were given these catalogs, which enumerated what had been on the ship originally. And for instance, you have a radio, and it told you what tube was where and how many. Well, they changed all the gear, so nothing corresponded. So we had a little conference, and we took all the blankets and parkas and stuff home with us off the ship, and everything else we just unbolted and threw over the side because it was impossible. I'd still be down there trying to match it. So then we turned the boat in, the ship in, and said, it's decommissioned, it's yours. Okay. So then I went up to New York and got separated, was discharged honorably, strangely enough. Caught a roaring case of crabs in the damn place. I mean, God, I got home, and about 5 days after I got home, I started to itch. And on inspection, I found that I had started a whole new generation of crabs. I never really picked them up at the damn separation center, and came home with them. Oh, that was a fight. Finally got rid of them using DDT. Thereafter, all my eggshells broke, but it was, and anyway.
So did you guys ever drink rocket fuel, any torpedo fuel for the alcohol in it or anything?
Yeah, we used torpedo juice, which is pure alcohol, and anything else we could get hold of. I mean, I've consumed some of the strangest concoctions and lived through it. Some guys didn't. Some people were blinded. Some died. When we were in the Philippines and we were in Manila, and the fighting was still going on, and another guy and myself went into this bar. Didn't have any roof left. They were still serving drinks, and we had a drink, and I went into the men's room and fell down, and I can remember just being frozen and seeing the tiles on the wall, and they hauled us out, and we survived. It was the booze. The Filipinos had been going up to Henderson Field and punching holes into the gas tanks of the Japanese planes, and fortunately their fuel was unleaded, because they were taking some of the gasoline, 100 octane gasoline, and cutting it with some whiskey, which was called Five Roses. We had Four Roses in the States, bourbon named Four Roses, and so they manufactured something called Five Roses. It was maybe not half, but it was laced with the gasoline, which didn't do you much good. Yeah.
Thank goodness that it wasn't leaded.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It wiped out the whole U.S. Navy. So that's the war.
And then it was, you were headed off to the invasion of Japan, if the...
Yeah, if they hadn't dropped the bomb, I'd have been planted someplace in Japanese soil, I'm sure. Yeah, we were staging for it.
How did you hear about the bomb dropping?
It was announced. We got it on the radio, and we were all very, very happy, I might add. And those people who now say we shouldn't have dropped the bomb just weren't there. And they may never have been there because their ancestors would not have made it out of there. It would have taken millions of lives had we landed and had to land. The Japanese were tenacious, they were dedicated, they were terrific soldiers. They lost the war because we outproduced them, not that we outfought them. They were They were good.
And what were you doing during the war, Mom?
Oh,
You were in school still.
yeah. 8 years younger than Les. I was still in school. I was in high school, and we couldn't get bubble gum. Bubble gum had gone to war. It was, we were protected. I was protected from it. The parents didn't talk about it at the table. We probably took Life magazine, but we weren't exposed to the horrors of the war.
Did you collect things on rubber drives? And you were talking about the metal
Mhm.
drive earlier.
Yeah.
So were there children's events geared
Yeah.
toward that? Or
Not that I know of. Not that I was aware of. We had campfire girl meetings, and I don't remember our making things for soldiers. Oh, we did knitting. We knitted socks, but we were pretty isolated from it, at least in our house. There were probably other houses that did a lot more talking about the war and bringing the children in and letting it be an event that was really happening. The strongest impression that I come away with is I knew how my parents felt about Roosevelt. I was upstairs listening to the radio, and they were down in the living room, and I heard something on the radio, and I leaned over the banister and said, "Mom, Dad, Roosevelt's dead!" And they weren't happy about it. They were, I knew they didn't like him, but I was astonished that they were sad that he was gone. Anyway, so my memories of the war were very skipping and benign.
Mhm.
It wasn't something that was brought home, except Dad was working for getting soldiers ready at Reed College, and we
when
were
you
knitting
went off
socks,
to
and
when you went off to school at the college, was this war still going on, or was it over at that point?
it was over.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I was in college from 51 to 55.
The war ended in 45.
Yeah. So.
And you studied general arts and
Mhm.
and architecture, is that right? And
Mhm.
a little bit, and
A little bit, and was at the University of Oregon for 2 years, my first 2 years, and I had a little scholarship from the Rose Festival. We each were given some money for our first year at an Oregon school, any Oregon school that we chose. So
We
that was
too.
that was nice. Hmm?
Who are you referring to when you say we each were given a scholarship?
Oh, the Rose Festival princesses were,
For a Rose
which was very
Festival
nice.
princess.
Yes. Oh, you missed that
Did you say that?
mini highlight. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you were down on the boat.
continuing on
Oh,
and
yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So did you talk about
Yeah.
your social coming of age in high school at all? Like your suitors or the prom or any of that?
No, I didn't. But we had proms, and we had rotating people we dated, and we liked to think that we were very sophisticated. And first kiss I got was down Harry Steinoff's basement. Yeah. His folks had a grocery store that was about 5 blocks from our house. But we were quite coddled and isolated from what was happening in the rest of the real world. I did horseback riding and costume making and play acting, and went to the Civic Theater a lot during those years, learning lines, ironing and learning lines for scripts, and
It was a popular war.
yes, it was a war with a cause behind it, with
Yeah.
a reason.
Yes.
And there wasn't an anti-war
No.
sentiment that I ever heard of. Did you?
No, there wasn't any that I could tell. Even my mother started a victory garden there in Montclair.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
best best vegetables we ever had came from that Victory Garden, and everybody was dedicated to it.
Was there a particular plot that was a Victory Garden and
Yeah,
people went
yeah,
to work? Wasn't
yeah.
your garden, your flower garden
No, it was
turned
up
into
the,
vegetables?
up the hill. It was an empty lot, and it was turned into a Victory Garden by the neighborhood. And Mother used to go up there and work religiously.
Was this to grow vegetables for
Mhm,
one's
food.
family?
Food, yeah.
For food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to go into a common coffer
No,
of
no,
vegetables for
no.
the soldiers or
No, no.
something. It was.
No, the government was very clever during the war. They created shortages, and like butter and gasoline. We had plenty of gasoline. We had plenty of butter, but they made shortages to discipline the population. Hell, when I was down in Key West, I'd watch the blimps that were on anti-submarine patrol. When they'd come back in again, they didn't want to come in with gasoline aboard. They just dumped the gas out at sea. See these curtains of gasoline being sprayed out of these dirigibles.
That sounds dangerous.
Well,
Not only wasteful, but dangerous. They still
yeah,
do it.
it wasn't dangerous. They were just dumping it over the side. And nobody's going to ignite it. They just wanted to get rid of it. We weren't conserving gasoline at all. And butter, of course, was supposedly being turned into munitions, and it was being stockpiled. A lot of it went overseas after the war. But everybody did something, and everybody was asked to sacrifice, whether it was for a good reason or not. And that was, as I was talking about earlier, guns and butter. You can't fight wars without having the population fight it with you. That's what happened in Vietnam. Everybody was isolated from the wars. We're isolated from the wars now in Afghanistan and Iraq. You've just got to get the population going, and they did it during the war. Nobody in our social circle liked Roosevelt, but I think he did a superb job.
Why did they dislike him?
Because he was a Democrat. Democrat were white trash as far as we were concerned.
Elitist white trash, though.
Yeah, but there weren't very many of them that we ever saw.
He was very well bred and
Yeah,
an aristocrat.
Oh yeah, he was.
Yeah.
But they called him a traitor to his class. And there was a strong class system then. It had, I had a lot of friends who were, not a lot of friends, but I had some friends who were Italian immigrants who spoke with an Italian accent. And they were nice guys, but they were very definitely the lower classes, considered in the Irish, some of the Irish. By that time, the Irish had mostly dug their way out from under the weight of the social system. But they were still looked down upon. Catholics, Jews, were second-class citizens.
When you came back after the war, was any of that hostility to other people's smoothed over because you'd fought next to an Italian, you'd fought next to
Nope.
somebody who had been thought of
No.
badly at school?
No, we picked up our old prejudices from where we left them.
Hmm.
Uh,
Did that happen with blacks too, or were blacks still segregated into construction corps and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, Seabees, in the Navy, the Seabees they had black battalions, the Seabees. When the war was over, I was sitting in operating base in Subic Bay in the Philippines, waiting to get transportation back to the States. And there was a black CB battalion there. There was a race riot And it was because the Marines had been shooting the black Seabees when they went down a trail. Well, that gets a little complicated.
Our Marines were shooting our
Yeah,
CVs?
yeah. Gets a little complicated. There was a guy by the name of Johnson who was a senator, and it was very. No, excuse me. That's another story. May tell later on, but perhaps I won't. No, this was just a straight race problem. The black Seabees were going down to Caribou Gulch, which was where the prostitutes were. And they had been told not to do it, not to go down there. We were all banned from going down and seeing the prostitutes. Everybody was. They went anyway, and they had some of the 1st Marines who were the regiment that went into Guadalcanal. They were pretty what we called Asiatic by that time. They were very trigger happy. They were disturbed mentally. These guys had been on Guadalcanal throughout the campaign. That was a very, very tough battle. Excuse me. And so when they were pulled out, they were put on guard duty and so on. And they were told that nobody was supposed to go down to Caribou Gulch. Well, some of the black Seabees did, and they were machine gunned down, which caused...
By whom?
By the Marines, who were put on guard and told that nobody's supposed to go down to Caribou Gulch. Well, they didn't, because they were killed, which annoyed their brethren, the black Seabees, who rioted. They commandeered all of us who were sitting around playing poker and waiting to get transportation home. They commandeered us to do guard duty. And I was given, because I was an acting high petty officer at that time, I was given some guys and some guns and told to stand guard on this reefer, a huge refrigeration unit where they stored food. So went down there and we're standing around. It was night, and a truck full of black Seabees came up and stopped, and I didn't know what the hell to do. So I just told everybody to sit tight, and I was prepared to tell everybody to run like crazy if these guys got out of the truck, because I didn't want to shoot anybody, and neither did these other guys. This is what we were supposed to do, as far as we were concerned. Fortunately, they stayed in the truck and they drove away. We spent the night there guarding the reefer. There was a lot, and that was after the war was over. In the Navy, the only blacks or minorities job was as mess cooks or servants for the officers in the wardroom. You didn't have any black sailors living in with the white sailors. It's strictly segregated.
So are you talking about when you said these guys went Asiatic, who was that did?
That was the Marines.
That was the Marines.
Yeah. Something we call it now, post something syndrome or whatever. Excuse me. So there was a lot of segregation and a lot of prejudice. Jews were accepted as being white. We had Jews aboard, good guys, but they were accepted. Catholics were accepted, but blacks, Filipinos, so on. You had a different color skin. You were different. It began to wear off not very long ago, as we all know.
Well, once the war was over and you were back, you went to school?
Yeah. I hadn't graduated from high school because I'd been thrown out of prep school. So I applied to Yale, which is what my friend, they said, don't be silly, you haven't graduated, you have to go back to high school. Well, I didn't want to do that, so my father got hold of Brayton Wilbur, his friend, whom I mentioned earlier, and Brayton said, well, we've got a school out here, junior college, that will take him, and he can take the first 2 years there and transfer. But they'll take him and matriculate his high school diploma. So I came out to Menlo Junior College, which was in Menlo Park, California, outside south of San Francisco. I got on if I remember correctly, it was an American Airlines DC-3 at Newark Airport. Started flying west, and a couple of days later we arrived in San Francisco. We hit Little Rock, we hit Phoenix, we hit it was like a local train. They get up in the air and then they come down there. And it wasn't 2 days, it was probably a day and a half to fly cross country, that DC-3.
Pre-jets. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the DC-3 would fly at about 120 miles an hour or something like that, and with stopovers and layovers and fueling and so on. It took a long time. Arrived, went to Menlo Junior College for 2 years, and transferred down to University of Southern California. My scholastic endeavors were, as usual, very mediocre, but I did graduate. My father had to send down to the school. He didn't believe that I graduated because I didn't go to commencement or anything. So my father wrote to the school and said, "Do you have a diploma for my son?" I said, "Yeah," and they sent it up. So I did graduate. I wasn't terribly sure myself. But, anyway, from then on, life got easy.
So how long was it before you met Mom, or had you met her during college?
No,
She was
I graduated in 1950 or 51, I can't remember which.
You were studying. It was religious studies, wasn't it?
Yeah, beer and women.
Rabbinical studies or something
Yeah,
like that.
that's right. Yeah, and well, we went on
Business
the GI.
administration. Wasn't that what your degree
Well,
was in?
yeah, it's in economics with a minor in advertising.
Hmm.
I think the yeah, it was. I met your mother in 1951
51 at a dance, to which Carol.
Was it 51?
Yes,
I graduated, I thought, in 51. Well, I guess that's about right, because I'd been munging around down in Hollywood for a little bit after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, then I went to Portland because L.A. at that time was a paradise. It was a gorgeous place, wonderful. And
So you went to Portland as punishment tour?
well,
or?
we had the motion picture industry down there. It was a good life, a lot of fun, a lot of partying, so on and so forth. And I thought that if I stayed down there, I'd be doing it for the rest of my life, which I probably would have been. Short life, but happy. But so I went to Portland, which I thought was probably the dullest place in the world. And I found out that in Portland they did the same things that they did in Hollywood, but they didn't talk about it.
Didn't you go to work for a
Yeah,
grocer?
in-store advertising gimmick. It was elevator music in the stores. It was the beginning of the elevator music. Every store now has some sort of god awful music. Well, we started that with this company called Point of Cast, I think it was. And anyway, it played elevator music and then took advertising also. So you'd have a song and then a voice would come on and say, buy Brillo for your teeth or whatever. And stayed there for a year. And then came down to San Francisco, went to work for U.S. Steel. Then, in the meantime, I'd met your mother, gotten entangled with the Thayer family, God, like an octopus.
Try rotate. Okay.
And
Don't leave
It
out
won't
my sister
go back.
Carol.
You have to spin it.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to hop up.
That's better.
I don't know how to approach.
Go ahead.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
remind him how we met, just in case you don't remember. We were, you were invited
Yeah,
to a formal dance at the Waverly Country Club,
that's right.
where the group of women had this
Okay.
this
Yeah. What did they call that?
yearly,
The
it's the
cotillion?
assembly ball.
Assembly ball. Okay.
Assembly ball, and I was invited, and
Yeah.
Carol was invited, and a group of women on the other side of the river who had children in
It
private
was
schools and so
debutante
on.
ball.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
you were invited, and it said formal, and formal for an East Coaster was white tie and tails. So that's what
Well, after 9 o'clock.
he wore after 9 o'clock. Yes. So that's what he wore, and he met my sister there.
And you,
Carol.
but you were a little child. then.
Yes, I had just been graduated from high school.
Mhm.
So Les hung around our house courting Carol for quite a long time,
Mhm.
months and months, and she decided to marry somebody else. And so we said, well, he's leftovers. We'll save him for for our little sister, Mary, Melissa. And but I got to him first. The sweater.
The pair went through.
Yes, don't ever discount the strength of glands.
Yeah, that's right. And so we dated, and got married in front of the fireplace at 6426 Southeast 34th.
So, how did your courtship go? Where did you get engaged?
Oh, well,
Well, she was going
Oh.
to Stanford.
yes. So I went University of Oregon for 2 years, and then Stanford for 2. And in my senior year, I was back up in Oregon with the folks down at the beach cabin at Nesquin. And Les drove up in your small car,
MGD, TD.
TD, and proposed by the manure pile at the Riding Academy down in Nesquin. And I only say that because you usually put that
Yeah.
detail in.
Well-
I beat you to it.
Yeah.
And Mother said, I'm on vacation. She was at Reed College working. She says, that's fine, but I'm on vacation and I need my rest here at Nesquin. So you go up to Portland and do the, all the deciding on where you're going to be married and so on. And I'll come up. And we were married in front of the fireplace in Eastmoreland. And same place where Carol had been married earlier to John Peck Cole. And we invited people to the wedding, and folks were there. We were married by Father Kiter, who'd been the pastor at the church that I went to, the Episcopal Church in Eastmoreland, when I was of a church-going mind. And my parents thought it was important to have a church experience because it's part of our culture. We should know something about it. So I went to church.
So you went for how many years and how frequently did you go to church?
Oh, I probably went 6 times to church, and then went off to college and came back, and after, I don't know, a few months, and I went back to the church, and I cried during the sermon. And I said, if that's all it means to me, if it's an emotional experience, there's nothing intellectual about it. I don't believe what they believe in the church. Then it's not valid for me to go to church. So I never went again. So
Combined, we have probably, with her 6 and my 3, we have 9 church attendances between us. I got kicked out of Sunday school. We had a little bit of we had an election for the president of the Sunday school class. And I was a firm believer in strong persuasion.
uh-oh.
And they didn't like that. So I left the Sunday school class. I've been kicked out of some pretty neat organizations. Boy Scouts threw me out for shooting out lamps, street lamps. Sunday school threw me out for strong arm tactics. Hotchkiss threw me out for at least 3 distinct reasons. I did make it through the Navy without being thrown out. I did make it through SC without being thrown out.
Yeah, you matured slowly but very nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those things, along with a few bars.
As long as we've looped back to your childhood, did you say anything about your pet collecting and escapades with the various
No.
creatures that you'd assembled?
No, no, I didn't.
You left the bats off the bedpost.
Yes, they were on the molding around the ceiling. Yeah, I liked animals. I thought I wanted to be a naturalist. So we collected animals. A friend of mine who lived in the neighborhood, Frank Staley, he was about a year older than I am, was just as immature, and we went around collecting animals. Bats were one of our favorites. They were easy to collect because we could go into the old iron caves in New Jersey. Which are dangerous as the devil, but we went in anyway. You could just collect the bats off the walls and put them in the bag or your pocket or whatever.
Dangerous because of...
Oh, the rocks falling in. Yeah, the
Oh,
collapsing
okay.
land.
Oh, so you weren't thinking about diseases.
No. We'd fill up on bats, and
Fill your pockets up.
yeah, and we'd have them at home hanging from the moldings, and my parents didn't particularly like that. My father told me to get rid of them, so I got rid of all but one. And he was sitting in the upstairs sitting room one night, and we had a dog, and my father catch something out of the corner of his eye, but he'd look and there wasn't nothing there. The dog kept moving its head around, and finally, Dad saw the bat. He just blew up. He came in, really read me the riot act. The bat had gotten out of my desk. I had it sequestered in a cubbyhole in my desk, and it had gotten out.
Did you bring in insects to feed it? Is that how you were keeping it alive?
No, they can last a long time without eating, and they'd be let go eventually. I didn't keep them. Squirrels, I had gray squirrels, the big gray squirrels.
In the bedroom?
Yeah, they'd live in my desk.
Didn't you do some releasing of bats in other environments as well?
Oh yeah, well that was fun because in those days there wasn't any television, and on Saturday night everybody went to the movie. I mean, the movies cost a dime to get in, and everybody went to them. They gave away free dishes, they had raffles, all sorts of stuff going on there. And we'd take bats in our pockets and sit down the front row, and then during the movie we'd pull them out of our pockets and set them free, and they'd flutter all over, and women would scream and so on. That was sport.
Because the
Sport.
light source was up in a high booth.
Probably cast big shadows.
Yes, and the bat would go in front of the light source, and the big bats would show up on the screen.
Everybody smoked in those days. Everybody smoked. You go to the movie, and it was just a like a London fog. Everybody.
Yeah, there were
smoked.
cigarette
Yeah,
Ashtrays.
ashtrays
Ashtrays,
at the end of your
yeah.
end of your
Every
arm
seat.
rest. Yeah.
Amazing. I learned to smoke when I was about 13, 14, 15, something. Probably around 15. With a girl who lived in Montclair. We'd go down to her basement and smoke. There's no carnal knowledge or anything like that. Just smoke.
I learned to smoke. A girl, her last name was Fry. Her father was the publisher of the Oregon Journal, I think. And we lived on the same block, and she gave me a pack of Wings cigarettes. Woo! So this was during the war. And they were an extra long, slender cigarette, very sophisticated.
Yeah.
And by the time I went to college, I was smoking Cools, which had menthol in them. And
Yeah,
I'd
we-
smoke about 3 a day. Whoa.
Never a
Yeah.
serious smoker.
No.
Which is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What other animals did you collect?
Opossums, albino frogs, you name it. If it
Skunk?
Huh?
Skunk?
Yeah, skunk.
Oh, we had a. You didn't get a wild one someplace.
No.
That's
no,
the skunk we had when we were first married and
Yeah.
lived in
Oh, okay.
San Francisco. Yeah, on Vallejo at.
It was
Fillmore at
wild
Vallejo.
enough.
Yeah,
It was plenty wild enough.
it would hide under the bed and bite your feet
Yeah.
when you hung them over the side of the bed. It also. Now, what was it that let the birds out of the cages that we had?
Those were the golden mantled ground squirrels.
Oh, they were clever.
Yes.
They could open their own cage and get out, and then they let the birds out of their cage, and then they climbed up onto the. Somehow they got up on the kitchen counter and up on top of the refrigerator, where we had a bowl of jam. There were jammy footprints all over the kitchen, and they got into the bird cage and took seeds, took squirrel food, no, bird food out, and took it into the fireplace in our apartment in San Francisco and put it in a pile in the fireplace. Oh, that was such a